Well, hello and welcome to Qlik Spotlight. And today, on this particular Qlik Spotlight, I have the very, very great pleasure of introducing Simon Bodger, who is an R&D manager based out of Ottawa. Welcome, Simon.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me today. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. And being a fellow person from Hampshire, it's even more a pleasure. So let people know. I'm sure most people around Qlik know who you are, but just explain a little bit about you and what your role is.
Sure. So I'm a TDM in the quality team. So I'm in Anders Samuelson's quality team, and I'm the TDM for the Software Security Office. So our responsibility is to look at new features and evaluate them for security concerns. So we call that threat modeling. So
Hmm.
somebody wants to do something new, and we have to decide whether if it's what the risk is to the product and how we would counteract those risks. So we call that threat modeling, and defending against those threats we call countermeasures. So we look at
Okay.
each feature as they come in.
So this is if someone wanted to hack into the system then. Is that what you mean? Is that what the threat level
Yeah,
is?
that's the kind of security we're talking about. So we're
Yeah.
not talking about the security of how do I talk to Active Directory server. That's just a
Mm.
feature of the product. We're talking about people who are trying to do things that we hadn't kind of intended them to do. So accessing data they don't have access to, or using our
Mm.
product to get onto a server that they're not supposed to be on, that kind of thing.
Okay, okay. Now I mentioned earlier about the Hampshire side of it. That's not a very Canadian accent. So where did you come from originally, Simon?
Sure. So I was born in Hampshire at
Mm.
Fareham, which I believe was just a few miles from yourself,
A few miles from
where you
me. Yep,
currently
yep.
are. Yep. We moved to West Sussex when I was about 8, so still down there on the south coast, just close to the seaside there on the
Mm.
south. And I went to university up in Liverpool, where I did a computing degree. And after that, that's in the northwest of England.
Yeah.
After that, I worked in the London area, in Bracknell, on the outskirts of London there, Reading, Guildford, all the
Mm.
home counties as we call them. And I ended up at a company called Cognos, which many clickies are familiar
Yeah, very
with.
aware of. Yeah.
And they actually offered to relocate me to Ottawa. So they didn't tell me about the winter when they made the offer.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful summer, and like, sure, it's a great opportunity. It was the Cognos head office, so I went there, and I was there 10 years. And then a couple of years after IBM took over, I started looking for new opportunities. I ended up working for VMware, which is on the west coast
Yeah.
of the US. I was working from home from the Ottawa office, and then after a few years, I came full circle back to some of the cognoids, which were now clickies, and here I
Ah,
am.
excellent, excellent. So what were you doing? Is it a similar kind of role as you're doing now, or have you gone through many different
So I've
types of
moved
roles?
through a few different roles in my career. So with Cognos, I started off doing some support, so first line support, talking to customers back
Mm.
before there was really internet connected devices. So we would pull down the manuals when customers had questions, and the good old fashioned way of doing things over the phone. And then moved up into second level, third level, and then made the jump over from the support and services organizations over into development. I've always had
Ah,
an interest in security, and
yeah.
that's how I ended up managing the security team for Cognos, and it's a kind
Mm.
of similar role here at Qlik.
So a question is not on your list, so I apologise, but it's just come to me now. Things like that happen. Things just flying in and out of my mind. Um, GDPR then, how has that affected your role, and what has that, has it made it more difficult for you? Is there more to do for you now?
So it's kind of raised it up on the agenda, which is a good thing. Now that is more of a compliance and a
Yeah.
security um, item, although obviously there's a big crossover. But it's good
Mm.
from my point of view because it forces people to consider things that
Yeah.
perhaps they hadn't wanted to consider before. So it gives us another reason for having good security and responding to what happens if something goes wrong, which we
Because
really
I
don't want
would
to.
presume if someone was to break in and steal data, which is what GDPR is all about, then you'd have to prove that that wasn't your fault, the fact that they got in loose security or whatever.
Well, so it's interesting that you kind of say it's not your fault because the industry has changed a lot
Mm.
in since like 10, 15 years. There was a time when security was a bit of a dirty secret within the
Yep.
industry. Nobody wanted to admit that when they had problems, they would quietly fix things and push out patches and not tell
Yeah.
anyone. And it was actually, believe it or not, Microsoft. I think of the Microsoft XP Service Pack 2 when Bill Gates sent a very famous letter to the whole company saying, stop everything that you're doing. We need to
Mm.
make this secure. And it kind of coincided with the internet being all these devices now connected. So
Yep.
a vulnerability that no one can get to is, it's still not great, but your risk is much lower. But suddenly
Yeah.
we're starting to put all these devices onto the internet that weren't, when they were architected, it wasn't envisioned. So
Mm.
the
Fascinating,
landscape
isn't it? Yeah.
shifted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to get back to your point with the blame, people started acknowledging that there is security problems. I mean, these are hugely complex systems that we're creating here with lots of moving parts, and things are always going to go wrong. If we wanted to
Mm.
create perfectly secure products, then we would never ship anything.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. You just wouldn't, would you? No, that's very, very true indeed. Now,
exactly. So the industry has kind of shifted
yeah.
into rather than expecting everyone to be 100% secure in all situations, it's really we're judged on how we respond to things,
Mm.
which goes back to what you're saying about the GDPR, which is legislation that partly says that when you are affected by a security vulnerability, then you have to be open and honest and let people
Yeah,
know.
which is good. But anyway, that's now moving away from that part. The reason why we're having a chat together today, Simon, is really around your role as a volunteer fireman. So, could you just tell me a little bit about what's happened? Now, I know we're going to bring up the subject of the tornadoes in Ottawa and your involvement in that, and we have some pictures that we're going to show as well around that. But just explain your role as a volunteer fireman and what that means to you.
Sure. So when I left Cogna, so to go a little bit back before that, I
Mm.
have a friend that's a full-time firefighter in the Ottawa Fire Services, and he was saying, "Hey, you should be a volunteer." He knew that I wasn't in a position to go for a full-time
Yeah.
firefighter, and I also had a neighbor who was a volunteer, and he was kind of encouraging me to join. But at the time when I was working for Cognos, I really didn't have the hours to put into it, and my children were younger, and I didn't,
Mm.
my wife would not have been happy if I'd kept leaving the house at odd hours of the night. And then I started working from home, as I mentioned before, at VMware. So I was in my home office and dealing with people. It's not always fun, but when you don't do it at all, face to face, you can go a little stir crazy. So
Yep.
it seemed like a perfect opportunity. The children were a little bit older, and and honestly, part of it was my children see myself and my wife heads down in our computers like all the time. We both work on computers, and I wanted to show them there's a little bit more to life as well than
You can
just
be an action man as well.
exactly. There's more to life than staring at a computer screen. So
Yeah.
that was partly driving my decisions as well. So anyway, I applied to. I live in an area that's covered by a volunteer fire station. It's part of the Ottawa Fire Services. Ottawa Fire covers almost 2,800 square kilometers, so it's geographically it's a huge area. So the way they handle that is the urban center is covered by full-time firefighters, and then on the periphery in the suburbs we have some rural fire stations. So I live in the catchment area. I applied. They interviewed me, and I had to pass the physical fitness, and they accepted me. So there I am.
Okay. So what does that entail for you then? What does that mean? I mean, do you have set duties that you do, or because I presume or are you just always on a bleeper or something like that?
Yeah, so we carry pages. We have in
Mm.
my station we have around 25 firefighters, and we respond on a best effort basis. So we get a page when an incident happens, and then the first 4 or 5 people to get there will jump on the what we call the pump, the
Mm.
primary attack pump. So that will be used for primary attack of a structure fire or a car accident or something like that. And because we are in a rural area, we don't actually have fire hydrants, so we also have a
Mm.
water tanker,
Oh, I
which
see.
that can follow on for if we need extra water.
Okay. Okay. So recently Ottawa was hit quite, and actually I think it got overshadowed by some by other events, didn't it? Which was a shame. But Ottawa was hit quite badly by a set of tornadoes or a tornado that damaged a lot of it. Can you talk a little bit around what you did there and what the experience of that was like?
Yeah, so I was actually in Lund in the Swedish office at the time. It was on Friday, the
Mm,
21st of September, and my we have an app on our phone to back up our good old-fashioned pages,
yeah.
and it started going off because it just needs an internet connection. And so I could see something significant had happened in the Ottawa area that we were being asked to respond to. And I got some messages from friends that had responded telling me what they were seeing.
Mm,
Um, and then I flew back on the Saturday, and when I landed, I got my messages, and there was some like requests for additional help. So it's not
yeah.
wasn't the first response help in like there's somebody trapped and that kind of stuff, but it was more of there's a lot of work that needs doing now. There's a lot of danger on safe
Mm,
structures, and the district where the one that we responded to. So there were several tornadoes that hit the Ottawa region, but the
yeah.
one that I responded to was it's about 15 kilometers from the office, a little bit closer. So it's pretty close to Qlik here.
Mm,
And it's what we call District 6. So I'm in District 9. So it's not an area that we would normally go to, but the guys were exhausted. They'd been working nonstop since the tornado hit, so they
yeah.
needed some relief. So obviously we do what we can to help our brothers and sisters in the other districts. So we put a crew together and went down there. We arrived and checked in with the command post. It was a multi-agency, so there's police, fire, the paramedics. And we all met at the command post, got our briefings, and we were asked to accompany homeowners to their properties to try and recover some of the critical property that they have. So insurance papers, passports, money, some keepsakes that they really couldn't, they didn't want to lose, computers, because we, like everybody else, they have so much data on hard drives and so on. So, but it was very emotional because we're dealing with homeowners who they're kind of paralyzed by choice because suddenly you're faced with this question of, well, what's really important to you, and they're asking us to go in and like they're describing where these items are because I think one of the photos that we can put up is what I was faced with when I went into somebody's master bedroom and just two of the walls were completely gone. They've been blown out. It's really tough. I mean, honestly, it's kind of a privilege to be with these people who and help them, but it is you never know how people are going to react, and overwhelmingly they're grateful, and then you almost feel guilty because you're like,
Yeah.
well, don't be grateful to me. I'm just doing what I can. You're the one that has suffered this massive trauma in your life. So
Yeah, incredible, incredible. So what? I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about this in the first place. Would you recommend other people to do this? Do you think it would be easy enough for someone to do this around their work? Is it something? And I know certainly in the UK there are volunteer firemen in the UK. So would you recommend this as something for someone to do?
absolutely. I wouldn't say take it lightly because it is a
No.
big commitment, especially initially in the way that Ottawa does it. You have to give up almost every weekend for several months to do the training
Oh,
because
the initial training before you start doing it full time.
exactly
Start doing
because
it. Yeah.
they're extremely cautious, obviously, on the safety. So for
Mm,
their own insurance and so on, they need to make sure that you're trained. So we receive the same training as a full-time firefighter, but theirs is what they call academy, where they might
mm.
spend like several months in the academy receiving their training. We have to do the same training, but it's split over weekends and
Over
evenings.
weekends.
So it,
So
so
that's
it's
a
it
commitment,
is a
isn't
big
it?
commitment.
And but it also, I mean, it attracts people who want to do the role, but not the glamour. So
Uh,
if you're going to make that commitment, then you are completely committed to that, aren't you? It is something you want to do. So
yes,
so good that we do it. Yeah,
yeah,
that you
the
do it.
friendships that you forge are
Mm.
pretty special.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. So with this and what you do as a volunteer firefighter, I mean, are there any skills that you would take from the firefighting to your Qlik role, and maybe the other way round as well. Any of those translate into the different roles?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, a lot of the skills are complementary. Um,
Mm,
the the timelines are different, right? So when I make a decision at Qlik, it may be something that we have to live with for months or years. But if I make a
mm,
decision as a firefighter, then usually the consequences are instant. So
yeah,
it's just silly things like where do we park the truck?
yeah, yeah.
So if you're the first fire truck into a structure fire, where you park the truck is critical because you have to think about water supply, you have to think about all the other trucks that are coming in behind you to help you, you have
Mm,
to think about whether there's going to be a ladder truck coming in to gain access to the roof. So it's a split decision, but the
mm,
consequences are down the line.
yeah.
And it's similar with when all of us in our jobs, we have to decide and prioritize, and the consequences that come down after it, you can't always change that decision.
Mm, it's fascinating, and it's something I thought about, but having the time, the same as you, to do that is a thing, and fitting that in is yeah, it can be difficult, but also very, very rewarding, and I can see that from the way that you're talking about it. So thank you for describing that, and for giving us a tiny little peep into what you do. We're going to now sort of change a little bit, and we're going to find out a little bit about Simon Bodger, the R&D, or TDM, and volunteer firefighter. So this is around heat as well. This question is around heat, so I think it segues in quite nicely. Can you cook, Simon?
I can cook. I do cook quite often. My wife, I have to be honest, generally does the day-to-day meals. I normally cook weekends or
Yeah,
special occasions. Though and also I need to be able to drop things at a drop of a hat. So
of
so
course, of
quite
course. No,
so
so,
quite
but I mean,
often.
you can cook a bit. So do you have a signature dish? Is there something that they
I have
sort of cry out
actually
for?
in the last year I've really got into sous vide cooking, where you do the immersion in water.
Ah, yes, Josh Good does that as well. So
It's
I think
so
he's someone else who
that's
does
a
it.
lot of fun, and it's perfect because you have such a tolerance on timing
Mm.
that I can leave it there like an extra hour or two. It doesn't matter. So any way of cooking meats in sous vide is good.
Yeah,
It's
now you
hard to
said
screw
that,
it up.
I need to look into that. That might be a good thing.
Absolutely,
So,
you should.
as far as music is concerned, then, what do you listen to in the office, or I don't suppose you get time to listen to it in the fire tender or pump or whatever you call it. But otherwise,
No.
what do you listen to?
So I'm really stuck in the pre for the 90s and earlier. So I started listening to podcasts
Mm.
once those became popular in 10 years or so ago. So I don't listen to the radio. So I have no idea what's been released in the last 10 years
Now
or
you're
so.
in my
So
era, Simon. Don't you worry. You're right
so
in my era.
everything from the Beatles right up, up to Genesis, any Pink Floyd, anything kind of old schoolish.
Kajagoogoo?
Not a lot of Kajagoogoo.
Yeah, hopefully people will be going on to Google now and trying to, they'll be Googling Kajagoogoo and yeah, all that. So, and also when you go on vacation, what are you, I mean, my geography is so rubbish, but I don't know how close to the sea Ottawa is. But are you seaside or are you countryside?
So Ottawa is not close to an ocean. It's pretty central.
Mm.
But we have a lot of lakes, so fresh water.
Ah,
So there's
okay.
a lot of national parks in Ontario, which are beautiful.
Mm.
And anybody who's looking for a vacation, I recommend going to one of the provincial parks in Canada for sure.
Mm.
So we often go camping near a
Oh, nice.
lake
I
in
like
the
camping.
Ottawa area. Or and sometimes with the kids, we take the trip down to Florida for Disney
Just
World.
perfect. Just watch out for the bears. I went camping in the Rockies in Jasper and Banff, and everything had to be put into a bear-proof locker, and that was even your
Yeah, for
toothpaste. That
sure.
was
You don't
slightly
want to leave the food out. And actually,
no, no,
that's
no.
something else we have in common then, John. Why I got married in Jasper, so
Oh, did you? Oh, it's a
yeah.
beautiful
So
place. I
you've been there.
loved Jasper. Yeah, it was very
Yeah.
nice indeed. Yeah, and Lake Louise and everything. Anyway, so okay, so you're a part-time fireman. You also do your full-time job. I presume that leaves very little time to do anything else. But if you can, you mentioned you go camping and so on. But what do you do to relax, to cool down a bit?
So I do a lot of tech stuff, so home automation. I like to dabble with that, play with different devices.
Hmm.
But photography would be the biggest thing that I do
Oh, fantastic.
outside of my work and volunteering.
Excellent. Yeah, because of what I do with the filming of the interviews, I do a bit of photography as well, and it is a good way to relax, isn't it? It is. Okay, well, I mean, we come to the end of the interview now, but I always leave people with an interesting fact, and this one is a quite a special fact, Simon. I'm sure you'll appreciate the humor around this. Is that llamas have a special pair of fighting teeth, and you'll never guess what they use those fighting teeth for. They use them to bite off other llamas' testicles. Llamas are a wonderful, wonderful animal. Just don't get too close, especially when they're fighting. I'd say that to all males out there. Be very careful. So, so now
It's
you
good
now
to
you've learnt that, Simon.
it's
That's
good to
a
know. I'll
yeah,
stick with the
yeah.
bears.
That's- Yes, I would stick to the Bears. Simon, thank you so much. That's been incredible. And as I said, I look up to you for doing that. I think it's a marvelous thing that you do. And thanks for being a part of Spotlight. It's been brilliant. You take care.
Thanks, John. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.